Good evening. This is Maestro Critello with the Dawn of War 2 Retribution Elite Modcast. Today we have a 1v1 on Calderis Refinery. Our first player right here is Kisuke the Forgiver, or maybe it's pronounced Kisuke. It's, I think that's like a Japanese name or something. I'm not sure. But anyway, he's playing as this Tyrant Lictor Alpha, an infiltrating melee hero, very sneaky, very powerful, particularly pretty good against Space Marines. And on the other side of things, we have Blessed Spartan, playing as the Space Marine Apothecary, a healing commander, not a great fighter, but he heals some very durable units, preventing a lot of Space Marine bleed, and Apothecary players often don't lose that many models on their squads. So this is a matchup, I often say this, that at least for a while, and possibly still, it was considered a very difficult matchup in favor of the Lictor Alpha. It probably still is, although maybe not as much as it used to be. It was especially considered an almost impossible matchup back when Scout Sergeants could be killed off and needed to be rebought, much like Tactical Marine Sergeants. That was particularly difficult because Scout Sergeants were required to detect the Lictor Alpha, and the Lictor Alpha could just use his Flesh Hook ability to instantly kill the Scout Sergeants. So, obviously these days, the Scout Sergeant is now a permanent member of the squad, but there are still some things about this matchup that are supposed to be very difficult for the Space Marines and make it very good for the Tyranids. And it actually has a lot to do with that Lictor Alpha. The Lictor Alpha, he is an infiltrating hero. There are not too many of infiltrating heroes in the game. In fact, off the top of my head, I only know of the Commando Knob, and I think that's it. Now, compared to the Commando Knob, the Lictor Alpha is, I'd say, a lot more hard-hitting. Or at the very least, I'd say he's hard-hitting in a very different way. The Commando Knob is hard-hitting against high-model, low-HP squads. So he's very good against Eldar, against Imperial Guard, when he does things like use his shotgun and use the shotgun blast, or uses his stick bombs. The Lictor Alpha, on the other hand, I'd say is very hard-hitting against high HP, low-model squads, which characterizes the Space Marines. With that Flesh Hook ability, he can instantly kill a Scout Marine. He can very quickly bring a Tactical Marine model close to dying, and then he can, whenever he uses his Flesh Hook, he can always Flesh Hook a unit so that it's being pulled towards the Tyranid army. If not, sometimes it's just pulling it to the Lictor Alpha by itself, but other times you can actually pull it into your entire army, and that will almost guarantee a kill on certainly a Tactical Marine model, and even the Apothecary himself. That Flesh Hook is very good against the Apothecary himself. It will basically almost instantly force the Apothecary to retreat, and on some occasions it will just straight up wipe the Apothecary if you Flesh Hook him into your army. And that's basically, that's an ability. The Flesh Hook ability is just a point-and-click disruption ability, which is extremely good against single entities, particularly weaker ones who don't have a lot of staying power. Now, the Apothecary can get some staying power out of healing himself, but that's often a wasted heal, since heals from the Apothecary are often better spent on Tactical Marines or Assault Space Marines. So the Lictor Alpha does get that free point-and-click disruption. The Apothecary can actually upgrade to the Mastercrafted Bolter to get some of his own point-and-click disruption, and that can be helpful, although it's still definitely not as good. For one, I'm pretty sure the full auto ability on the Mastercrafted Bolter has a shorter range than the Lictor Alpha, than the Lictor Alpha's Flesh Hook by quite a bit. And then secondarily, you're paying for that disruption instead of getting it for free. The Flesh Hook ability is free. Additionally, so we're going like a third reason here, the Mastercrafted Bolter full auto ability will pin the Lictor Alpha in place, while the Lictor Alpha's Flesh Hook ability pulls the unit toward you, so you can pull it toward your army, which is much more powerful. And then it also just synergizes better with the rest of the Tyranid army, which consists of more melee units, which means higher overall DPS, which is better for wiping a unit. Kisuke is not happy about something. I haven't been watching the chat. I'm just trying to focus on the gameplay. So, Kisuke has gone for some war gear upgrades. These feeder tendrils are an extremely good upgrade. I would say one of the best war gear upgrades in the game. It's very powerful. It's a power melee weapon upgrade. And it's 63.75 DPS. That means it's higher than the Force Commander's Power Sword. It's higher than the Plague Champion's Power Sword or the Commissar's Power Sword. It's just a very powerful weapon, and it heals the Lictor Alpha for 2% of his health with every strike, which is quite a bit, especially considering the Lictor Alpha does attack very quickly. Kisuke also got the adrenal glands, but his Lictor Alpha is about to die. He got the adrenal glands. Basically just, when the Lictor Alpha goes down, that's very, very good for Blessed Spartan, since, especially with the build that Kisuke has right now, the real main threat to Blessed Spartan is going to be just that Lictor Alpha, and he's now dead. The current build that Kisuke has is actually very easily countered by Blessed Spartan's current army. The Hormagaunts, as long as they can get suppressed by the Devastators, will not be much of a threat. And then the Termagants are very easily countered by both the Tactical Marines and the Assault Space Marines. The Tactical Marines will just be able to bleed those Termagants, bleed a lot of those models while not taking much bleed themselves, especially if they are in cover. The Assault Space Marines hard counter pretty much any ranged unit anyway, and Termagants are a particularly squishy ranged unit. Now, although this is a matchup that should favor the Tyranids, Blessed Spartan is in an extremely strong position at the moment. He got a Generator Bash, a full Power Farm Bash, which is extremely helpful. And I think part of the reason he was able to get that was that Kisuke just went for a very light Tier 1 build, so he wasn't really able to fight, maybe a little too light, so he wasn't able to fight off all of Spartan's units, and now he lost a full generator farm. So Kisuke he rushed to Tier 2, he pulled out a Tyrant Guard, which is a choice that, it's an interesting choice. I'm blanking out on words because, to be honest, it's a choice that I don't fully understand. I certainly know that what the advantages aren't of the Tyrant Guard. You might think of it as a vehicle, and in some ways it is. It cannot retreat. It can be snared by anti-vehicle snares. But it does not have vehicle armor, so it doesn't quite have the effect that a vehicle does, because units like Tactical Marines can still actually do some damage to it. Somewhat minimal damage. Super Heavy Infantry Armor does give you Super Heavy Infantry Armor does have a 70% resistance to piercing weapons, so that's quite a bit. But that's still quite a bit better than vehicles, which literally give you something like a 99% resistance to piercing weapons. And piercing weapons are basically any of the bolter weapons, most ranged weapons. In fact, pretty much any Tier 1 ranged weapon, except for plasma pistols on certain commanders. But any bolter, any shooter, any of the Tier 1 ranged weapons on Tyranids, on the Raveners, on the Termagants, those all do piercing damage, so they will all have roughly a 99% damage penalty against vehicle armor, but only a 70% penalty against super heavy infantry. I don't know if the 70% is actually an exact figure. The 99% isn't quite, but it's definitely roughly in that ballpark, and by the time you get to that ballpark, it's basically just the damage is negligible. We actually have a Las Cannon out for Blessed Spartan. Now, Las Cannon, unfortunately, the way it was set up in that situation was not well managed. He pulled out the Razorback very close to that to that Tyrant Guard. Luckily, he did readjust. He just put all of his units back inside the Razorback and then have them drove farther away, which is one of the advantages that Blessed Spartan is going to have right now with the Razorback over that Tyrant Guard. The Tyrant Guard is not an especially mobile unit. Relatively slow speed, although it can be under Synapse, I believe, definitely from the Hive Tyrant, and I think also from the Lictor Alpha, which will make it move faster. These Infestation Towers, which grant a +1 speed buff, I think will also make it move faster. Ooh, with Blessed Spartan now going for a Dreadnought. This is one of the things I've noticed about Blessed Spartan's play, is that he seems to prioritize getting more units over upgrading his existing units. And there are certainly advantages and disadvantages compared to that. Although overall, I actually would say I think it's somewhat of the better choice, because he gets bigger armies out on the field, and sometimes you just have too much to deal with. Razorback is in a little bit of trouble. So is this Devastator Marine squad. Devastator Marines are very, very vulnerable to melee units, particularly Howling Banshees, and they will in fact go down there. So that is the risk of leaving a Devastator Marine squad out of position against basically any race that has some kind of powerful melee unit. And by powerful melee unit, these Hormagaunts do, in fact, count as a powerful melee unit, since they do have very high DPS. Their starting DPS is actually higher than Banshees. They are, I wouldn't say they're as good as Banshees, but just the numbers on their damage or their DPS are better. The base DPS, that is. We have a double vehicle play, in fact, from Blessed Spartan. He needs to do something to Dreadnought, though. A part of the double vehicle, what's good about the double vehicle play is that it's especially good when your opponent only has one source of AV, because they can only shoot with one source of AV, and you can actually use one of your vehicles to counter that AV, because it'll only be able to focus on one. Technically, Kisuke has two sources of AV. He also has the Tyrant Guard, which does do heavy melee damage. Some of the spectators are commenting that Blessed Spartan got a missile launcher, and that actually is a curious choice. The missile launcher will do better damage against the Tyrant Guard than the regular bolters of the Tactical Marines, but the plasma gun will actually be doing much, much better damage than the missile launcher, many times over. I'm going to throw out a ballpark figure, but I think something like roughly the plasma gun would be doing anywhere between 3 and 5 times as much damage as the missile launcher against the Tyrant Guard. So a lot. It would just be a lot better. One of the advantages of the missile launcher, I guess, is that it would be better for bashing power generators. But overall, I would say, yeah, the plasma gun would have been a better choice, especially because it would also be useful against the Venom Brood. So you would be using that plasma gun to counter the AV that he has. One of his sources of AV. Razorback is going to start taking fire now. Again, Blessed Spartan not prioritizing upgrades, so he doesn't have that. He doesn't have the extra armor on his Razorback, and he's going to lose the Razorback because he's just not really microing it. He has his attention somewhere else. The Apothecary has been upgraded to the Mastercrafted Bolter and is shooting point blank against the Venom Brood, and now the Apothecary, I think, will go down. We have... oh, no. Oh, my God. Wow. Very nice play. So I thought that was going to be the Apothecary going down from the Lictor Alpha chasing and maybe even using the Flesh Hook. But then the Dread was right there, and the Scout Marines also dropped a grenade to take out that Lictor Alpha. So Lictor Alpha dead on the floor again, but Blessed Spartan now looking a little low on units. Spore Mines dropped in. Spore Mines, I've been finding, are very nice. They are especially very good against high model, low HP squads, and especially Heretics. I've learned in a very difficult way how good those Spore Mines can be against Heretics. Not going to be quite as strong against the Space Marines, but since they are a call-in for the Lictor Alpha, they can be very, very useful in the middle of an engagement, especially on a setup team that is either suppressing the Tyranid army or a las cannon that is snaring and damaging a Tyrant Guard or a Carnifex. You just call down those Spore Mines wherever you want, and then they're instantly suppressing and damaging. And then if your opponent wants to deal with them, they have to divert their already other fighting forces to dealing with that those spore mines. So Kisuke is doing reasonably well. In fact, Kisuke is doing very well considering he should have been at some kind of power disadvantage, some kind of economic disadvantage. He suffered power bashes. However, Kisuke has also invested less. That Tyrant Guard and the Venom Brood aren't nearly as costly as the Dreadnought and the Razorback. Not to mention all the upgrades that Blessed Spartan has now got. I said that he doesn't prioritize upgrades, but at this point he has gotten upgrades. He has an Assault Marine Sergeant, Scout Sergeant, no TAC Sergeant, but he's got that missile launcher, which is has a pretty hefty power cost, even though it's very inexpensive when it comes to requisition. And then that Dreadnought, of course, is a very, very expensive investment. Although I've been told that it is very good against Tyranids. In general, I actually think vehicle plays can be pretty strong against Tyranids, since their AV is actually somewhat lacking, I've been finding. Especially, I've been playing Tyranids a bit on random, and I've been finding their AV a little unsatisfactory. And I've heard people complain about the Tyranid AV before, and I'm starting to get it a little bit. Obviously, they rely a bit on these Venom Broods. Venom Broods they just do damage. They don't snare. In fact, the only Tyranid snare, I believe, is the focused warp blast from the Zoanthrope, so that kind of requires you to get a Zoanthrope, which is not a bad choice, but sometimes Tyranid compositions, as we see right here, it's hard to fit a Zoanthrope in here. Although, if there's any unit here that's not necessary, it would probably be the Tyrant Guard. But Kisuke is doing well with the Tyrant Guard. He's kept it alive. Now he's got a Tyrant Guard as well as a Carnifex, which is going to be very tough for Blessed Spartan to deal with, I think. So Venom Brood, since they don't have any snare of their own, and since Kisuke does not have any kind of vehicle snare, something like this Predator that Blessed Spartan is building could be very useful, since with enough kiting, it should be able to... Oh, very nice grenade right there. That was a grenade that was kind of just straight up thrown, but it was basically just to punish the blobbing that Kisuke was doing. Kisuke actually only lost 3 models, but he certainly lost a lot of health there. Lictor Alpha. Lictor Alpha, I feel like he hasn't been using the Lictor Alpha that much in a way that you would normally use a Lictor Alpha, or at least not in a way that really takes advantage of the stealth capabilities of the Lictor Alpha. He's basically actually been using him as a frontline fighting unit, and it's actually not... There's nothing wrong with that. Other than that, you can use the Lictor Alpha in a different way. The Lictor Alpha really can perform in that way, even though you wouldn't initially think of him as having that role, but he's got 800 health now, which is not bad with that Adrenal Glands upgrade. And then, of course, those feeder tendrils going to make him very, very powerful, both just in terms of the damage he deals and keeping him alive. So he would actually be very good just as a Termagant and a Venom Brood bodyguard. The Assault Marines jump in on the Termagants or the Venom Broods, and then the Lictor Alpha can actually go to counter them, when we'll actually do very well bleeding those models, possibly even getting a special attack. So we do have a Venom Cannon Carnifex. Interesting to see that. To be honest, I tried the Venom Cannon Carnifex recently, and I've been seeing how much not good it is in terms of... I believe right now it can no longer fire on the move, which can actually make it very poor against something like a Predator, as long as the Predator is being microed, which currently it is not. But this Carnifex is now in a lot of trouble. This is an engagement. It kind of looks like a bit of a cluster or something of an engagement. I think the Carnifex, so the Carnifex is in a little bit of trouble. The Predator needs to micro away. Angels of Death on the Space Marines. That could be a dead Predator. It's getting very close, but more likely we have a dead Dreadnought, as well as a dead Apothecary, I think. Yes, dead Apothecary. Dead Apothecary actually doesn't hurt too much, but the Carnifex is going to go down as well. Dead Apothecary is actually not such a big deal. But we're also going to have... Wow, a lot of dead units. Dead Predator, dead Carnifex. Dead Lictor Alpha about to be in a second, I think. Yes. Wow, so that was a crazy engagement. A lot of units were lost. That dead Lictor Alpha is actually going to hurt a lot more than the dead Apothecary. The Apothecary has that Laraman's Blessing global, which is a great global because you can use red to get your hero back instead of requisition, which, as much as it's nice to save that red for something else, it really is better to spend red on getting your hero back than spending requisition. And the Apothecary just has that convenience that no other commander has. Obviously also very good at teams, where you can use it to revive your teammates' heroes as well. But it's actually, if anything, even better in 1v1 since you can't have a teammate revive you. Blessed Spartan also has... Blessed Spartan should really use Laraman's Blessing. He has a surplus. Right now he has a surplus of red. Yes, and he did use it right there. He has a surplus of red. Still at over 400 after using the Laraman's Blessing, so he has plenty of red. He's going for another Predator, which could be a decent choice. He has enough red to use Terminators, and I actually think that could be a good choice right now. It depends a bit on what Kisuke gets next, but right now against Kisuke's current composition, some Terminators would be very good. They would be extremely hard countering the Termagants. From range, they will be slaughtering the Hormagaunts as well, and I think they will counter the Venom Brood as well. Certainly, a Predator is a very good unit as well. It's hard to say that there's something bad about that, especially right now. Kisuke does not really have sufficient AV to deal with that Predator, and I already talked about some of the reasons why vehicles can be very good against the Predator. I mean, vehicles can be very good against Tyranids. We have some kind of call-in right there, probably Spore Mines. Yeah, Spore Mines. Unfortunately, not a great Spore Mine call-in, just because the timing wasn't so great. Unfortunately, Kisuke lost that engagement, so he's kind of just using his Spore Mines to being annoying at this point, and if he's really lucky, which he wasn't, he could have gotten a model kill there. He would have had a better chance of getting a model kill on the Scout Marines than on the attacks. Fully kitted out Apothecary, Purification Rites, Combat Stimulants, and the Mastercrafted Bolter. I feel like Purification Rites aren't terribly necessary at this point. They would mainly only be working against the Hormagaunts, or if Assault Space Marines jump right into Termagants, he can use that on the Assault Space Marines just for some extra disruption. But overall, not really so useful at this point, although, I mean, I guess what else could he get? Could get the advanced medical equipment. Make sure, since the Apothecary right now has 3 different abilities, he's going to have full auto from the Mastercrafted Bolter, combat stimulants, and healing. If he had the advanced medical equipment, that would ensure that he could use all 3 when he has a full energy pool. And yes, they are saying some things in the chat. The Tyrant Guard is not a vehicle, or at least it does not have vehicle armor. It has heavy infantry armor. That being said, at this point, I actually think... Oh, Blessed Spartan, he's switching to the plasma gun. I was going to say, I think he should keep the missile launcher, because he knows that Kisuke is in tier 3, and he knows that even if you kill a Carnifex, you can often expect Tyranid players to get another. I mean, that Tyranid tier 3 is... It's... Basically, once Tyranids are in tier 3, you can expect them to continuously go for tier 3 super units. The Carnifex or the Swarm Lord. Where is the Apothecary? The Apothecary, I think, should get a heal on the Assault Space Marines, but he does not have the energy because he was using full auto on the Lictor Alpha. The Assault Space Marines could really use a heal right now, but it looks like the Apothecary himself needs a heal, so he uses it on himself and knocks over the Lictor Alpha with that Purification Rites. Now, one of the things that I don't like about what Blessed Spartan is doing is that his Apothecary is somehow up in the front lines. Now, I may have missed parts of the engagement. That could have been the Lictor Alpha flesh hooking him into the Tyranid blob, which is certainly something that can happen. But
Otherwise, the Apothecary, especially with that mastercrafted bolter, should really be hanging back. Assault Marines are going to go down! Oh no, they will be just fine, but it was a close call. I think unnecessarily close. And they do make it to level 3. Oh, and the Tyrant guard goes down. So Blessed Spartan actually got a new tactical marine squad. So he's actually got a missile launcher on one tac squad and a plasma gun on the other. That's not bad. At this point, the plasma gun is now pretty much useless, but I think that was actually a good choice before when Kisuke still had the Venom Brood and still had the Tyrant Guard, because that means that Blessed Spartan would have both something to counter the Venom Brood and the Tyrant Guard, as well as the Carnifexes with the missile launcher. And then the missile launcher could be used in combination with the plasma gun to just overall do a ton of damage to the Tyrant Guard. Tyrant Guard is done now. Blessed Spartan, I think, is letting his Apothecary get into melee with that Lictor Alpha a little bit too much. With that mastercrafted bolter, he is going to be losing quite massively. And to be honest, even with, I think even with a melee weapon upgrade, he would be losing to the Lictor Alpha. So, interesting to see Blessed Spartan get a second tac squad. I don't disagree with it. I actually think it's, in some ways, I think it's really good. Tacs are just that a durable squad with solid damage, and Kisuke has he's preserved his Termagants, which is pretty nice for him, but just right now, Blessed Spartan is going to have Termagants very well countered with double tactical marines as well as assault space marines. So it's interesting to see some of this. There's always different styles of play you can play with any given race. Blessed Spartan has elected not to get tactical marine sergeants. There are a lot of things, a lot of upgrades that he chooses not to get in favor of getting out more units and getting out more powerful units. But Blessed Spartan, all the spectators are saying things about what Blessed Spartan needs to get. Oh, there's a Tyranno formation. I was about to say Blessed Spartan has enough red to do a nuke of his own, but instead he uses Angels of Death, and the Venom Brood will go down again. That's not good for Kisuke. Soon he's really not going to have enough AV. And that Angels of Death saved this missile launcher tac squad pretty much, I think. And we're going to have another dead Carnifex. And Kisuke is frustrated about the tank, and yeah, I personally think a well-managed tank can be very good against the Tyranids. Kisuke is calling a GG, since without a snare, that tank is gonna, and without a snare, when the tank is properly microed, it should be very, very difficult for Tyranids to kill a tank. Venom Cannon Carnifex, again, I believe right now cannot fire on the move, so it really doesn't have much ability to pursue a tank. And instead a tank would have a lot of ability to pursue it. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the cast. Have a good night.